Hello, good afternoon or good morning, as the case may be. My name is Roy Hadley, and I'd like to welcome you to the Technology Association of Georgia, we'll call it TAG to keep things short, webinar today. Today we're going to be talking about cybersecurity challenges during this COVID-19 crisis. And basically, how do we secure the new normal? What is the new normal, and how do we secure the new normal? Today we're joined by very distinguished panelists who will really give you a lot of insight, firsthand, frontline insight as to what's going on out there in the cybersecurity world currently as companies are working remotely and really shifting their operations to deal with this new normal. First, we're joined, and I will ask each of them, once I introduce everybody briefly, to just give us a 15-second spiel on what they do, who they are, that sort of thing. First, we're going to have Greg Chevalier, who is with Abacode. We also have Chris DesRosiers with Tech Data. And lastly, we have Paul Ashe with Securance Consulting. So Greg, I'm going to turn to you. Briefly introduce yourself to the audience, please.
Yeah, hey, great, Roy, thanks. It's great to see my friends and colleagues virtually. Certainly wish I could be with Chris, Roy, and Paul in the same room. I am Greg Chevalier. I am the Senior Vice President, Partner and Sales Strategy for Abacode. Abacode is a Tampa, Florida-based company doing business at a global level as a managed security service provider. And one of the unique propositions that we think we bring to our clients is we approach cybersecurity from a business perspective. This is not a technical fear factor conversation any longer. And at Abacode, as we say, we were born out of the boardroom, and so we align very well with our clients as it relates to cybersecurity from a business perspective.
Thanks, Greg. And Chris, what about you?
Hi. Great to be here. Yeah, I wish I was in the same room too. So it's the new norm, and this is part of it. So my name is Chris DesRosiers. I'm the Director of Business Development for the Security Division at Tech Data. Tech Data is a Fortune 100 company that distributes over 1,000 vendors in terms of their technology. We have dozens of professional and managed services that we also distribute. Now, our customers are primarily VARs, systems integrators, MSPs, and MSSPs. And so that's kind of where we sit in this space. And I'm glad to be here, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Paul, what's going on with you today?
Thank you, Roy, and I am certainly pleased to be here joining the distinguished panelists. As Roy said, my name is Paul Ashe. I am founder and president of Securance Consulting. Securance Consulting is a Tampa-based firm that works nationally, providing cybersecurity assessments to all types of organizations of all sizes. We really have deep expertise in all of the cybersecurity compliance frameworks and looking at the technology stack, the entire technology stack in identifying risk.
Fantastic. Thank you. So, we look and there we are. My name is Roy Hadley again, and I am with the law firm of Adams and Reese. I'm in the privacy, cybersecurity, and data management practice team, and we do a lot of work across the board with clients of all shapes and sizes in the technology, privacy, and cybersecurity area. So I know these gentlemen well, looking forward to hearing their insights today. Why are we here? This little virus thing that's going around, and not to minimize it, but talking about COVID-19, a novel coronavirus, and it has taken the world by storm. And when I say that, I think people were, generally speaking, not prepared for the depth and breadth of the impact of this virus. Just the fact that we are all doing this virtual today is a testament to this virus. Normally we would, as Greg and Chris and Paul said, we'd be in a room somewhere talking, going back and forth. We would have had a little lunch. We would have shaken each other's hands and laughed with each other. Not be the case right now. This too shall pass, but until it does, we have to keep our eye on the ball. What does that mean? Phishing attacks have spiked when you start talking about COVID-19 and coronavirus, and the number of phishing emails that people are getting has just spiked, as you can see in that. Also, the number of malicious websites have just gone crazy in terms of not only just malicious websites, but websites that have COVID-19 or the coronavirus in it. So that's why we're here. That's what, we are looking at. Before this COVID crisis off, we had, a threat landscape. We're all cybersecurity people here, generally speaking. We're concerned about it. But we had a threat landscape, and that threat landscape has changed. But Greg, tell me, before this happened, what generally did the threat landscape look like? Yeah,
so historically, Roy, the threat landscape has traditionally been inside the four walls, inside the firewall, or what I call the on-premise infrastructure. In other words, it was where you did business primarily. Could be in a cloud environment, could be in your data center, but you had a fairly good visibility into where that entry point was in the organization that could provide a potential risk. That doesn't exist today. Think about what we are all doing right now as panelists. There is risk in what we are doing as panelists. Could be on a home network, could be on a corporate network VPN. We're using Zoom, which had significant security vulnerabilities over the last couple of weeks, and they're catching up to fix those. And so that landscape definition has changed dramatically as a result of the work from home. It's from a device perspective, it's from a network perspective, and it's certainly introducing significantly more vulnerabilities. So, the travesty in the word catastrophic for the coronavirus goes well beyond, the word health. It's the health of individuals, it's the health of the economy, and now it's the health of organizations from a cybersecurity perspective.
Right. Thanks, Greg. And I know, so the question then becomes kind of where do we go from here? Chris, what are you seeing out there from a VAR perspective? I mean, because of what your company does, you have your fingers on the pulse. What are you seeing in terms of how this whole fundamental shift, and Greg kind of mentioned it, people are working from home, people are logging in, you've got teleworking, you've got teleeducation, telemedicine, all of those, as people have transitioned to now working from home, what are you seeing in terms of cybersecurity and just networks in general as concerns and things people are thinking about?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So, a little bit of insight into the VAR, MSP, MSSP market for those attendees today that deal with those types of companies. So being in the position I'm in, I speak to hundreds and hundreds of these businesses all across North America, US and Canada, every day and every week. And in the last, 8 weeks or so, 6 to 8 weeks, their biggest concerns are primarily about supply chain disruptions. That's the number one kind of issue, is making sure that the supply chain is not impacted, because when they're impacted, their customers, like many of you on the phone today or on this call today, are impacted as well. So that's kind of one of their top concerns. The other piece is themselves managing remote workforces, their own folks. And I think as technology companies, most of those businesses are pretty well optimized. They understand networking and VPN. So that's one piece of it. But when you get into larger organizations that have, HR departments and other departments that are kind of brick and mortar based, that's where they need to pivot and set up those components. The next piece in the VAR community, MSP market, is just being able, for those that deliver professional services on site, and adjusting their on-site CDC and WHO processes to deliver great service. They're also concerned about cash flow, looking to renegotiate finance terms as well, because we're expecting the second quarter generally to be a big impact to the economy. I think that's pretty obvious, but it's not lost on any of your partners that are doing business out there. But the last piece, and the silver lining, if there is one, is that we had tech data in my division the security division, we had a great quarter. This last quarter that wrapped up for us, we're on a different fiscal period. And so our second quarter was really good in terms of endpoint solution sales, VPN sales, all of those kind of MDM technologies that you would expect. So we saw a huge spike in that. And whether or not that perpetuates, it remains to be seen. But that's what's happening amongst the VAR and MSP and MSSP community.
Gotcha. And you brought up some very good points. I know supply chain disruption is huge right now, as is, how are you going to get paid? Getting work and then getting paid. I know I'm hearing word of clients actually starting to proactively ask if they can delay payments right now. And so I think you're going to see more of that. Paul, I know you work as a virtual CISO out in the marketplace. What are some of the things that you're seeing, kind of piggybacking on what Chris kind of brought out there? What are some of the things that you're seeing in the community right now?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question. I would say really over the last 6 to 8 weeks, we've certainly seen a shift in the nature of the conversations that we're having with CIOs and other directors of IT, and they really fall into three or four categories. And to kind of piggyback on what Chris said, certainly one of the main concerns is MDM, mobile device management. How can we secure that mobile device and ensure that we're getting the greatest protection? So MDM, we're getting a lot of questions right now about implementing multi-factor authentication, right? And because that's a critical control that a lot of organizations either don't have in place or only have in place for a limited number of their executives. I think the other areas that we're getting a lot of interest and questions, right? Because we provide that strategic thinking for organizations is really, is really with respect to what are the benefits and value of moving to a VDI environment, as opposed to allowing users to connect with the company-owned device or a personal-owned device from a remote location. So hand in hand with looking at the values and the risk with moving from physical workstations to VDI, also compare and contrast that with implementing what I would refer to as an older school technology, where how are we ensuring that our users are connecting with the company-owned endpoint that we control the configuration and the security of? So if an organization is controlling the security and configuration of an endpoint, then they have much better confidence in what their network looks like from a security posture perspective. So those are the areas where just the conversation has completely shifted, right? To now we have to put more focus on securing these endpoints because they're coming in from all different locations and they're all different types of endpoints. So that's really been a major shift in the last 6 to 8 weeks.
Great points.
Hey, Roy,
I know Greg.
Roy?
Yes.
Roy, would you mind if I ask Paul a follow-up question?
Not at all.
So I love the VDI suggestion, and I think it's spot on for sure. There's a technology out there that I'm aware of called web browser isolation, which is specific to web and allows basically any sort of payload to be delivered in a sandbox environment. So, the web presentation is kind of a repeated image to the desktop. And it's similar to a VDI technology in that, the image of the desktop is presented or the image of the website is presented. So my question, Paul, is given the fact that web browser isolation technology is out there, do you see that as kind of a phase one for those that may want to consider VDI being, a full virtualization of every application presented to the end user? Or how would you kind of, differentiate between web browser isolation technology is kind of phase one? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, Chris, that's a very good point and a very, very good question. In terms of web browser isolation, I would say that we're not really seeing a high level of adoption of that technology. And I think it is in part because it's just not a lot known about it. I would agree with you that
it's emerging. It's emerging.
Yeah, it's an emerging technology. And I would agree with you that that's probably a first phase. And certainly for an organization that has more concerns about budget. More concerns about budget, right? We all have budgetary concerns, but when you look at some of the costs in implementing full VDI. One of our clients has over 6,000 endpoints, and to implement VDI for that, there's a heavy lift on the infrastructure. So looking at browser isolation certainly absolutely could be an initial phase into kind of putting your toes into that water.
Yeah, good point about the emerging, not well known. I just was made aware of it about 6 months ago. Tech Data just signed up a web browser isolation firm, and I just thought, wow, this is a really compelling technology and really interesting and a nice kind of toe in the water, if you will, about kind of a work from home strategy. So sorry to derail, Roy. I'll pass it back to you.
No. Hey, this is great stuff. Great stuff. But I am going to follow up kind of on something that Paul said. And Greg, I'm going to ask you, I know, mobile device management, all of these devices now are out there and they're logging in remotely. What are some of the things that you guys at Abacode are seeing in that space? And then I'm going to follow up all three of you after Greg answers. And the question is going to be something that Paul mentioned, and that is budgets are shrinking. Revenues are going down, budgets are going down. I know here in the state of Georgia, the governor has tasked every state agency with decreasing their budget by 14% next year, because that's what they're estimating revenues will be. So the question is going to be for all three of you, kind of what are you seeing out there with respect to budgets going down, and what can companies do to kind of compensate that and still, to the best of their ability, be as secure as possible? Nobody's ever 100% secure. So I'm going to turn back to you, Greg, with the question about what you all are seeing out there with respect to mobile device management, some of the threats you're seeing, and some of the things people are doing to compensate for those.
Yeah, appreciate that, Roy. And again, it goes back to that threat landscape and how that's increased significantly. And so we are advisors to all of our clients about getting your arms around how wide and how far that threat landscape is. And so in this particular picture, Roy, we're showing what the historical had been inside those four walls and what that new threat landscape looks like today. And in particular, as you said, mobile device management, Chris touched on, web browsing from multiple different form factors. Paul talked on, the home device and the employee device. And so what we're seeing, regardless of the device type, be it mobile device, a personal device now, which you have to factor into consideration, right, we're advising customers that you've got to get your arms around that landscape and then put foundational monitoring solutions in place for what that new landscape looks like today. And that's now giving you much broader visibility into where these threats are coming from. As we all know, the bad actors are going to continue to take advantage of the least path to resistance. And they are watching us just as much as we're watching them. They're listening in on conversations like this, trying to figure out, are people using personal devices for now work from home? And they're coming up with vulnerabilities and threat exploits that will attack the least point of resistance, which right now is outside the firewall in the work from home environment. And so that's what we're seeing from that device perspective is you've got to get your arms around how far that landscape has now grown, and then put some fundamental monitoring technologies in place. Real quick on the budget side of things, all the while, how do you do this as budgets are reducing as a result of significant economic impact? And what we are seeing a lot of our customers do is cut back on resources internally in terms of deploying them out to this broader attack surface, bring in third parties that already have scalability in place from a platform and monitoring perspective. And frankly speaking, we're seeing a significant uptick in our monitoring technology and monitoring services around this broader landscape, which is allowing customers to not have to be greatly impacted from a security threat perspective because of a budget reduction.
Gotcha. Great points. And Paul, I know you're kind of in the trenches there on the front lines with respect to those budgets. And what are you seeing out there?
Yeah. So with respect to budgets, first and foremost, I'm going to say, I mean, we're all security professionals, and typically in an organization, when budgets get tight, security tends to be one of the first thing that goes, and it's because it's an unseen, right? I can't really see the value of what you're bringing to the table until an event occurs. And so what we're seeing is we're not really seeing that shift where we're seeing the reduction in terms of the emphasis on security. But what we are advising our clients is to look in your environment and look where you have overlap and redundancies in technology. So if, for example, you may have a next-gen firewall that has an antivirus module. You may have an EDR solution, endpoint detection and response solution, that also has antivirus. So there you have layers of reduction, and there may be an opportunity to eliminate some of these license fees, some of these license costs, but not reduce the security that you're providing the organization. So generally, that's what I'm seeing. I would echo also what Greg said in terms of seeing organizations reducing some staff and looking for third-party experts that they don't have to train, that they can say, hey, we trust you guys to do this for us in this time frame. And if that means being smart about, just to pick up on the monitoring, the systems that are being monitored, if that means to be smart about what systems are monitored, and let's place monitoring on the high risk systems and the high value assets in terms of data assets, and maybe not monitor some of the lower risk. These are strategic ways that organizations are looking to reduce costs because of the budget pressure.
Chris, I know you're in the bar arena, and I'm not going to ask you to divulge your client's revenue. I mean, your revenues or anything like that. But are you seeing a reduction, or do you think you're going to see a reduction in cyber spend because of where we are economically and just in general?
Good question. Actually, I'm bullish, and I think that bodes well for everybody on the call and everybody listening with respect to cybersecurity. I'm very bullish on it. And the reason is, there's a lot of new technology that's just moving into the homes, right? Home networks, all the rest of it. And there's a work from home kind of cottage industry that will be developed around optimizing various risk profiles from executives that may not be, technology efficient, to others that are in HR and other departments. And so everybody on the call and they're going to require different levels of technology support and engagement to go along with that. I think there's definitely going to be a place for cybersecurity because it is ubiquitous and it lives everywhere. It's like air. It's got to be in every part of the network with defense and depth strategy. So that's kind of one comment. The other comment I would make about budgets relative to cybersecurity, both Greg and Paul make really good points about looking for third-party providers that are optimized to deliver maximum value, to maximize the budget and the performance, kind of offloading the noise, if you will, and allowing the cybersecurity strategists at the enterprise to focus on the strategic issues. That's one good strategy. There's in the vein of emerging technologies, there's a new emerging technology that Tech Data distributes that allows you to provide risk assessments that actually put the output reports are in financial terms. So, for example, if there was a risk assessment done on an enterprise or a mid-size client out there, wouldn't it be nice to know that you had top 10 threats, but your biggest threat is if unremediated would result in $1 million payout, right, through lost business, remediation efforts, et cetera. And so what this technology has done, this emerging technology has done, is gone ahead and looked at all the standard industry classification codes and determined what are the typical fallout from issues not being remediated. So 10 different issues, different dollar amounts associated with it. And that allows board of directors, IT directors, and CIOs to optimize their cybersecurity budgets when a risk assessment is done in terms of financial output or financial risk. So a lot of cyber insurance companies use this technology quite a bit.
Yeah,
very neat stuff.
Can I link a few together? This is what I love about this format here is in the interaction with the group is we can link a lot of these things together. So Roy, you think about it, the question started with mobile device management budgets.
Right.
We're coming full circle now to really highlighting the point of that question. And, relative to budgets and Paul's commentary that, budgets are reducing and cyber is typically the first to go. We all know that. That's been historical. Mm-hmm. But no longer can that be the case, and we can't afford it. Right. Cyber needs to shift to where the threats are moving. And so from the budget perspective, the commentary of, letting some of this go to the outside where the experts, where those organizations that you're trusting to run your cyber program, they have the wherewithal to quickly shift. I can assure you in January, Abacode, we were not thinking about technology and services to the extent we are just today as it related to the work from home. So what did we have to do? We had to shift quickly. We had to talk to our partners at Tech Data, talk to our partners like Paul, figure out what was happening in the market, where were customers panicking, where were threats coming from, and then we had to rapidly shift our focus and solution set. So I think from a budget perspective, I don't see cyber going away. I'm like Chris and Paul, bullish on it. I think there's going to be a shift in where our funds are allocated. I do believe second quarter is probably going to dip. Organizations are going to figure out how to get their arms around that new landscape. I believe there's going to be a shift to the cloud, and then cybersecurity spend will be reallocated from what was historically mostly inside the firewall to outside the firewall and the work from home and in the cloud. And then that allocation is just going to shift into different pockets where the threats are. And God only knows, a year from now, we might be having this conversation again.
Yeah. Let's hope not.
A new threat that we have to go chase down.
Right. Let's hope it's at least not this threat. Hopefully we will have solved that. And you bring up a great point, and I think that's something for everybody out there listening is you have to be agile. You have to be flexible. You have to be imaginative in how you approach these things because, as you said, in January, none of us, I'll speak for myself, would have never imagined that we would be here doing this because of a virus. Other threats maybe, but not a virus, or not the human kind of virus. We may have been thinking about some cybersecurity virus, something new and novel there. And so you do have to be flexible. And that I'm going to pivot here a little bit on you, gentlemen. And one of the things that we really haven't talked about is the human factor here. Because as we pivot to this new normal, let's just say, we got social distancing and 6 feet and all of that. But, what skill sets that cybersecurity professionals need to have, the question is, have they shifted? Or are we seeing a different landscape coming for what cybersecurity professionals need to be thinking about in their skill sets, in how they work, how they operate? Paul, I'm going to turn to you and ask you kind of your thoughts on the human aspect and what cybersecurity professionals and the cyber labor market needs to be thinking about and what it kind of looks like in this new normal.
Yeah, that's a very good question, Roy. I think there's a few things. First of all, we know, right, that there is a shortage of cybersecurity professionals, right? That shortage is nothing new, and the organizations that are smart are figuring out how to kind of bridge that gap. I think in terms of really a skill set and the labor, I think in terms of a skill set, I think it's important for organizations really to look at what I would refer to as junior or younger cybersecurity professionals, younger cybersecurity professionals from the perspective of one, I'm thinking right out of the university, they have a new perspective. They don't necessarily have the experience, but they have a new perspective and they have experience with the newer technologies in terms of the work from homes and the Zooms and all of the, mobile technologies that I have a 15-year-old son and I've been in IT for 30 years and he always is springing something on me that I have to now monitor, right? And so looking at a junior analyst or someone, 1, 2, 3 years removed from school is certainly a way to get that new energy, that new knowledge, that new skill set. Certainly it doesn't diminish or negate the fact that you need experienced professionals in the environment, in the ecosystem as well. But that's one way. And when it comes to labor, I think that what we Securians do is we try to partner with universities. We go into cybersecurity classes and education and speak to real world experiences. And that kind of gives us a little bit of advantage in bringing in some talent because they're familiar with us. They've seen us. And so that allows us to, bring in this new set of skill set and resource.
Chris, from your standpoint, I know with what you do, you're providing labor a lot of times in these engagements. Are you seeing a shift in the skill sets or where the market is going for cybersecurity professionals right now?
Yeah, I just actually gave a presentation recently on this exact topic, and there's a lot to kind of say about the cybersecurity shortage. First of all, globally, there's about 3 million jobs that are going unfilled right now, and the U.S. is suffering quite a bit from that. I would ask the listening audience to visit cyberseek.org. This is a website that was built by the National Institute of Standards Technology, or NIST, in partnership with other agencies. And so they basically figured out and quantified the cyber labor shortage that's out there. So take a look at cyberseek.org. It's one of my favorite websites. In terms of what we're doing, we're taking it head on. Tech Data is a global distributor, as you know. I mentioned that earlier. We're the only one in the world, really, to build our own cyber range, which you can see right behind me. So the cyber range is a training facility dedicated to training those people that are interested in developing their cyber skills. So there's basically a few different missions for the range. We have obviously training and education. We've got technologies in a vendor agnostic way in our data center, a lot of different cybersecurity technologies that can be tested and integrated with each other. And then it's also kind of a location for us to deliver professional services through partners like Abacode, for example, through our cyber range, things like vulnerability assessment, pen testing, et cetera. So that's kind of what Tech Data is doing in terms of building our cyber range and making it available to the channel. And so when I say the channel, I mean our customers and their customers, many of whom are on the phone today. We also distribute SOC analyst training. So if there's anybody out there that is interested in SOC analyst training, there's a few different ways to go around that. We have a few different solutions that offer kind of all-you-can-eat, missions and sieges, attack scenarios that can be recorded and played back. You get a dashboard. Managers can see how their SOC analysts are doing. We're also building for helping partners out there build security businesses. So we're spending a lot of time helping a lot of our partners actually build a security business through our digital practice builder program as well. So we're very in tune with the shortage, and we're taking concrete and expensive steps to try to remediate that through things like brick and mortar ranges and offering solutions to the channel to help spin everybody up. But to Paul's point, you're right. We got to start getting more into the youth, start investing more there. Those are going to be the CIOs and the vCISOs of tomorrow. So there's no need to avoid that. We need everybody we can get. It's all hands on deck.
Fantastic. I'm going to pivot on you again, gentlemen. That's good stuff there, Chris and Paul. Greg, people are often accused of fighting the last battle, right? And particularly here in the cyber world, sometimes we're looking in our rearview mirror instead of looking at the road ahead. And as this new normal takes shape, I think people would love to hear your thoughts on what new threats you're seeing out there, or are they the same threats? Are they still ransomware? Are they still things, that the tried and true? As we enter into this new virtual mobile world where we're doing, remote access, remote learning, as we talked about earlier, what are some of the threats that you're seeing that our listening audience ought to be thinking about and making themselves and their companies aware of?
Yeah, excellent, right. I got to throw in a little fun here, and I'll give Chris a commercial. So Roy, you and I know each other from going to a stellar Super Bowl party each year. And
That's right.
Fun. Where's my invite?
If you're serious about the Super Bowl, you go to that party. If you are serious about building cybersecurity skills and solutions, you've got to go to the Tech Data Cyber Range. I've been out there myself a couple times. Fantastic environment. So I'll give that little commercial. So Roy, what I think that businesses are not doing well enough, looking forward down the road, is at the start of the session I said, Abacode is laser focused on cyber from a business perspective. And historically, we as cybersecurity professionals, we sold on the fear factor. It was, look what happened to company A, company B, that's going to happen to your organization. And then we started selling on the compliance factor. If you're in PCI, retail, payment card industry, you have to talk to me. I'm a cyber professional. If you're in HIPAA, you have to talk to me. And I think what the shift has become today, businesses need to leave cyber to their cyber partners, cyber threats to their cyber partners, but they need to begin having conversations with those that they do business with and asking the question, what are you going to expect of me from a cybersecurity program in order to keep doing business with you? That could be more catastrophic economically than an inability to recover from coronavirus. In other words, if your customers and prospects are continually asking you to put in place a best practice cybersecurity program, and now more than ever, because of the work from home environment and the vulnerabilities, so you're in their supply chain, you're delivering a good or service to them, you're touching their data, that's where businesses need to focus. What is it that my industry, my customer, my prospect is asking of me? And then bring that back to your cyber partner to implement. And that's around a best practice framework. So that's where we think, instead of looking in the rearview mirror relative to trying to predict the technology threats, businesses should be looking forward, talking to their customers and suppliers and vendors and prospects and industry about what the expectations are to put in place best practice. And then we as the professionals will continue to look in the rearview mirror and the side mirror. We'll adapt as things like work from home hit. And the threats are the same. You know, the phishing attacks used to be inside the firewall from the CFO to an admin. Now they're from outside the firewall, from an admin to a counterpart, coworker, et cetera. So those technical threats aren't going away. It's the business threat that I'm more concerned about.
You know, if I can add,
Great stuff,
Roy.
Paul. Yeah, I was just going to say, Paul, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that same question.
Yeah, and I certainly, I really, I have high degree of respect for all of the panelists, particularly Greg, and what he's talking about from a business threat perspective. You know, in my seat, sitting in a lot of CIO's office, right, they're still focused. We're still focused on the technical threat. Right. I think the business threat is, I agree with Greg, it's a much larger threat. But in terms of the threats that we're seeing from a technical perspective, I think they remain to be the same. At the beginning of this discussion, that there was a slide that showed the increase in phishing, right? So we're seeing a significant increase in phishing, but not just an increase in phishing. We dig into the metadata of these phishing attacks, and we're seeing a shift in the time that these phishing attacks are being launched. Right. So now bad actors are launching these attacks at very specific times. More as we analyze and we see it, those times tend to be more aligned with when people are more sleepy, when people are not as focused, when kids are getting off of school. So now you have the kids at home doing schooling from home. There is a distraction. So as an employee working remotely, I'm not as focused. Right. And so we're seeing a time shift in those threats. But generally, you know, I think the nature of the threats is the same. But I would agree. And when I'm having conversations with CIOs, I try to steer them to that business risk, because, again, as Greg said, we as cyber professionals, we can handle the technical threats. We are experienced. We know how to handle. We know how to detect. We know how to respond to those. But it's that business threat that I think is the new norm.
Chris, round us out here.
Yeah. So in terms of attack vectors and kind of what's changed, I actually did a stare and compare recently from 3 different reports from well-known vendors and carriers on kind of the state of cybersecurity, and started to come up with some themes around what they're seeing and what's kind of new, what's the same, maybe what's enhanced. So some of the new ones are ransomware attacks against health and life science companies. So if you think about, what's urgent, right? Whatever's urgent and important is where the bad guys are going to go. So health and life science companies that publicly identify themselves as producing research on the COVID virus make prime targets to lock up their data with ransomware. And so there's a real distinct effort right now for bad guys to go after health and life science. Another one is this idea of the likeliness to pay. So some of the research indicates that the number of kind of spray and pray attacks is actually lower in the fourth quarter last year, because cyber criminals are basically focused more on the likelihood to pay. And so state and local governments typically don't have all of the tools they need to be able to detect when somebody's compromised their network. And so we're seeing those guys kind of linger for quite a while and then lock up information, because state and local governments can seem to find the money when they're shut down. Real quickly, fileless malware spikes that don't live on the hard drive, just living in RAM. That's a big spike last year. Encrypted threats that live inside of TLS and SSL traffic are more prominent last year than previous years, and so you would need to have a technology that uses deep packet layer inspection to be able to detect that. And then, of course, the other one is IoT, right? IoT devices are typically not built for hardened interfaces, hardened kernels, hardened operating systems, and so when you get to 5G coming into the window, the 5G wireless coming into the window with high-speed access everywhere, these IoT devices become particularly vulnerable. And then the last piece is web attacks, web application firewalls. We're all connected to cloud and Dropbox and Zoom and everything else under the sun. And a lot of these web-facing interfaces are subject to attacks through distributed denial of service and other nefarious behavior. So the bad guys are doing quite a bit to try to get around that. So those are kind of some of the top of mind things that I'm seeing based on some recent research and what's happening out in the world today with the virus.
Fantastic. So we're getting close to the end here, and so I'm going to circle back around and ask each of you for a couple of closing thoughts. Something of value, put you on the spot here, that might be of interest to our listening audience that we haven't touched on. And to give you time to think, one thing I am going to kind of throw out there to the listening audience is all of the things that we've talked about are, for the most part, fundamental changes in how you're operating your businesses and your operations. There are also fundamental changes in what you are doing from an incident response or business continuity standpoint. So I would ask each of you to really take a look at your business continuity plans, your incident response plans, and use some of the lessons learned from how you have responded to this incident to update those plans to make sure that going forward, they are in the best positions should, as Greg said, we're still dealing with this next year or we're dealing with something worse. We tend not to capture those lessons learned and best practices and then update our plans. So take a look at those. Also take a look at your policies and procedures, your written policies and procedures. Do they correspond with what you're doing? And if they don't, you need to update them. Your privacy policies, your terms of use, your handbooks for your employees, all of those things need to be updated to reflect this new normal in terms of operations and in terms of how you are conducting your businesses. You also need to think about asking your suppliers these same questions that you're asking yourself, because I think it was Chris that said, that's a huge area of vulnerability. Greg may have said it also. If your suppliers and your supply chain aren't doing what they need to be doing to be secure, and they're interfacing with your systems, whether it's through an ordering system or a payment system or something else, then you or a management system, then you're just as vulnerable as they are. And the things that you're doing that we've talked about today will be for naught. So that's just something I'd like to throw out to everybody for you to be thinking about in addition to the other things we've talked about. So Greg, I'm going to start with you. Round us out. Bring us to the end here.
Yeah. First off, great fun. Guys, you're awesome. I would say study your industry, talk to your customers and prospects, and identify a best practice framework. You really got to get yourself on a best practice framework. I can assure you, everything we talked about today would have linked back to a control in a framework, be it an industry regulatory framework. If you're healthcare and HIPAA, your retail and PCI, your government subcontractor and CMMC. And, Roy's a world-renowned study on CMMC, by the way, so he knows it better than anyone. Pick a framework and identify that framework based on your industry, your customers, your suppliers, and then begin identifying what you have in place today, what you don't. Implement systems and solutions to close those gaps. And I can assure you, all discussions today would have linked back to one control or another from a framework.
Paul, I see you shaking your head there. Tell us what you're thinking.
Yeah, I'm certainly agreeing. You spoke about the governance and the importance of governance, Roy and Greg. The importance of selecting a best practice framework of security and control. I think, to round this out, first of all, I think it's been a great discussion, but I think there's two areas that I would advise that the listening audience kind of pay some unique attention to. And the first of that is listen to your end user. Your end user and the experiences that they have on their device. Don't be so quick to throw that to the side. Really listen to the end user, because the end user behavioral experience is oftentimes information that could be useful in further hardening and securing the network. The next thing that I think is very, very important, and I know we've touched on it a little bit, but I don't think we can touch on it enough, is implement a strong vendor risk management process. Right. So again, you have all of these partners connecting to your network, connecting to your systems, exchanging data. Before you allow any of that to happen, assess the cybersecurity posture and practices of that vendor and ensure that they are at a level that you are comfortable with from your risk appetite perspective. So, typically vendor risk management is something that's huge and big in financial services. I think it needs to spread well beyond that industry and really begin to touch on all industries, how to look at who you're partnering with based on, in part, their cybersecurity stance.
Fantastic. Chris, close us out.
Okay. Well, you guys covered a lot. And so just to recap, vulnerability assessments, policies, checking them, end user experience, incident response, run books and playbooks. Make sure you exercise those playbooks, those run books. The other thing is, and I think this maybe hasn't been mentioned and it's very obvious, is security awareness. Just make sure that your user population understands that security awareness is more important than ever. Things, don't click on that email, use a password locker, right? Something complex passwords, simple things like complex passwords, multi-factor authentication, VPN. Those 3 or 4 things combined together exponentially increase your security posture from a remote work perspective or any perspective, just home worker, right? A lot of people reuse passwords, from their bank to, Walmart.com, boom. So, security awareness is critical, and it's got to be easy, and it's got to be culturally re-emphasized. So all hands calls, team meetings, working from home, make sure it's in your newsletters, your company newsletters. It's got to be part of the culture, because the best firewall is the human firewall. It's our cultural behavior as an organization that makes the difference, where every single person is actually contributing to the security posture. So all really great suggestions, every single one of them. They're all very important. And I think definitely we need to have a defense in depth and a holistic view about implementing security, especially in the work from home space.
Fantastic. Gentlemen, I think it can all be wrapped up by saying we always say you need to have a culture of security. And as Chris said, it just needs to permeate throughout your culture. So Greg, Paul, Chris, thank you so much for providing your wisdom and your insight today. I also want to give a welcome to Rebecca at TAG, who has been instrumental in helping us pull this together. She's managing the controls in the background right now. So Rebecca, thank you. On behalf of myself and everybody else on the call, thank you for joining us today, and we hope this has been helpful for you.
It was a lot of fun. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
you, gentlemen.
Thanks for having.
Thank you.
Guys.
Thank you.